Good evening. We have a joint meeting this evening. I would like to call the school committee meeting to order and remind everyone that this meeting, this Zoom hybrid meeting, is being recorded by WCTV, broadcast by WCTV, and also audio recorded by Jamie Wixton. And I would invite the other boards to call their meetings to order as well.
Good evening. Good evening. The Select Board is here, and I'm going to call our meeting together for the fiscal year 25 budget public hearing from the Wareham School. With us tonight, we have Mr. Slavin, Mr. Bessie, and myself taking over as chair tonight, Jared Chadwick. That's right. Also, we do have Town Administrator Derek Sullivan. He will be joining us through Zoom.
This is Norma Scoggin, Chair of the Finance Committee. With us this evening, we have Matt Rose and Jerry Stefanski, which means, of course, we do not have a quorum.
Okay, thank you.
Just so everybody understands, that means the Finance Committee and the Finance Committee cannot participate, unfortunately.
But can they ask questions as individuals?
Yes.
Yes, okay,
And
great.
they're recognized as individuals, so.
Thank you.
Violate open meeting law or anything else.
Great.
You just make sure you have your mic on you, Alan.
I don't have one.
You have one right there.
Now I do.
Could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? So we will begin with the public hearing of the FY25 budget, and I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Matt DeAndrea.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Tonight we'll be presenting the proposed FY25 school budget. I'd like to thank all who have helped put this presentation together, including the school committee and our administrative team. So we're going to be, the presentation is on that screen, and I know some of you have your backs to it. I don't know if you
That's
wanna-
the one that got emailed out, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you
I can
jump
follow
on the
from-
Zoom, it's.
Yeah, I
it's
can
there.
follow from my screen.
Okay, all right.
Not a problem.
Okay. So the first slide really is our vision and values and mission, and I like to include these in all of our presentations, just to remind us and our staff of why we come to work every day. As I have said before, nobody gets into education for the money. They get in because they want to do good things for kids, and we always want to make sure that we remind ourselves of that. Okay. I want to hit on first the assumptions that we're bringing to this budget. First of all, this will be a level service budget, essentially taking the budget that we have in FY24 and carrying it over to FY25 and adding in any fixed costs, contractual obligations that we need to add. So this will include steps and lanes for our bargaining units. It also includes increases to tuitions to some of the private and collaborative schools that we send our students to. That's 4.69%. We added 5% inflation. We also added 5% in our utilities, more for the elementary school. We're still trying to get our minds wrapped around exactly what the costs on utilities will be for that building, so we had to adjust it a little bit more. So this slide shows how our budget is broken down. It is in 7 cost centers. And I'm going to take you through each one of those cost centers, and you'll see what the cost of each is. The district part of our budget Breaks down into salaries and expenses. The salaries are many of our central office positions, myself and Director of Finance, but also includes secretaries, some of our technology folks, nurses, our facilities people, our HVAC plumber and our facilities director, our fields and grounds, and our crossing guard. Expenses, 1.7 million, that's a big number. That includes things like our contractual health services, nurses that we need to ride on buses for students who have significant needs, our student data system, legal fees, audits, Chromebooks for students, tuition reimbursement for our staff, and some of our insurances. Also included in the district portion of the budget are our tuitions. And this slide really breaks it down to the significant costs of the tuitions that impact this budget. We have one student who is attending Bristol County Aggie School. That's $30,000. But we have 22 students who are at collaboratives, and that's a $1.9 million impact on this budget. And we also have 17 students out at private schools at 1.6 million. So you can see that's a $3.6 million impact to the district part of this budget. These are students who we are unable to provide the education for them in our buildings here in Wareham. They have significant needs, and they need significant interventions and need to attend these specialized schools. I also want to point out that we need to transport these students to these schools, and that is not included in that number. That's in the transportation budget. Cost Center High School. We have 591 students currently at our high school. Average class size 16.5. Student-to-teacher ratio is 10.1 to 1. Salaries at the high school, 8.8 million. And expenses is about 958,000. Expenses for the high school includes textbooks, classroom supplies, technology supplies, and licenses. Athletics, utilities, maintenance, copiers, things of that nature. And I wanted to show you some of the things that we have going on at the high school, because we have some tremendous opportunities for our students. We offer AP classes, and this slide breaks it down, and I think you all have a printout of this presentation. If you don't, I want to make sure you do get it, because you can really dive into some of the great stuff we have. But we offer AP, IB courses. We also have dual enrollment, where students are transported to Bridgewater State University. So tremendous opportunities for learning and growth for some of our advanced students. We also offer a large number of electives for our students, and we actually have 2 slides that show you some of the great things that students can take at Wareham High School. The class of 2023, 51.4 went to 4-year public college, 14.9 went to 4-year private, 4.1% to 2-year public, other post-secondary 8.1, workforce 17.6, 1.4 in the military, and 2.5 we're not sure at the time. And some of the colleges that our students have been able to attend are pretty impressive. It's across the board, state and private, 4-year, 2-year colleges that are quite extensive. So our students have done quite well. Wareham Middle School. We have currently 406 students. 17.7 is our average class size. Class sizes currently right now are really good. It really helps to allow for our students to get a lot of individualized attention, and the teachers to really focus on the needs of the students. So keeping them in the range that we have them is tremendously helpful. Student-teacher ratio, 12.4 to 1. Salaries at the Wareham Middle School, 6.1 million, and expenses, 663,000. Our elementary school, we have 934 students. Average class size, 20.1. Again, that's a good number. Student-to-teacher ratio, 12.2 to 1. Salaries obviously significantly higher, 10.3 million, due to the larger staff because of the larger building and student population. Expenses, 705,000 for about $11 million at the elementary school. The remaining 3 cost centers I have here broken out for you. $319,000 for our curriculum instruction and assessment. That's our assistant superintendent, her secretary, and much of the professional development that we offer out to our students, to our staff. And also I think there's some software that it comes out of that portion of the budget in order to provide some supports for our students. And Andrea, I don't know if I missed anything in there, but that's about right. Student Support Services, ELL. This is our special education and English language learners, 1.3 million. In this part is our Director of Student Support Services salary, out-of-district coordinator salary, and a secretary. Our 2 ELL teachers, English language learners. BCBAs, which are board-certified behavioral analysts, 3 positions. It also has our ESY program, which was a summer program for our special ed students. And there's a few other things, home tutoring, our eSped software program for special education. And then finally is transportation, 2.9 million. That includes our transportation coordinator, her secretary, 33 drivers, 11 monitors, 5 subs. It also includes our out-of-district transportation. So when we need to transport students to some of these schools that are in, say, Yarmouth, we need to hire a van. Sometimes we use our own vans. Sometimes we need to contract it out. We try to keep as much within the district as we can, but that's not always possible. So that's all part of that cost center. So taking a look at the comparison between FY24 and FY25 in each of these cost centers, what I did is I put the column for FY24 and FY25 and what the difference is. You can see $568,000 increase district-wide. That is primarily affected by the tuition increases that we're going to have to pay out. And I want to point out those tuition increases are they're determined by the state. How much they are, and I believe it was 4.69 for next school year. Wareham High School, 574. Wareham Middle School, you'll notice that the high school's at 574, the elementary school at 792, and then that Wareham Middle School is significantly less. That's really affected by where we have applied some of the ESSER 3 offsets that that we're losing this year. It's also that the middle school is having some retirements, teachers on different pay scales impact that also. So that's why that number is a little bit different than the others. Curriculum instruction, $64,000 increase. Student services, $29,000. And then transportation, $193,000. That's primarily the increase in transportation costs to our out-of-district students. So you can see that the increase after all of this is $2.3 million. I want to emphasize here or point out that the $36,965 for FY24, that's not what Wareham paid for the public schools last year, because we receive monies from state and federal government that we can use to lower that number. And I'm going to show you how we did that in FY24 and how we plan to do that in FY25 in a couple of slides. But before I do that, I just want to look at that $2.3 million increase, and I want to show you what makes most of that up. So if we take that 2.3 million and look at what's impacting that or what's causing that increase, 1.5 million is contractual obligations. So that's our bargaining units, steps and lane increases, COLAs for the bargaining units that we have them for. We have 3 bargaining units that are currently in negotiations. So we don't have that number yet. You can see that's a significant portion, over approximately 2/3 of that increase. New Chromebooks, $199,000. All of our students receive Chromebooks, a very helpful tool to meet the needs of our students. But of course, they only last for 3-4 years before they need to be replaced. So we're trying to get into a cycle of making sure we're replacing them for students when they need to be. Heat and utilities, based on current numbers and expectations, $137,500 increase. Out-of-district transportation, again, that's a big hit, increases, and the tuitions. Lights at the middle school, $30,000. There's some work that needs to be done to, we're having an issue with the lights blowing out, and we're just making necessary fixes so we don't have that. And our home and hospital tutoring, that's based on current numbers that we're seeing that needs to be increased by 20,000. Now the 169,583 other, that is 64 other lines in the budget that are under $20,000 that we had to increase, and we looked at, based it on previous years, tried to make the adjustments based on what we anticipate that they will cost. Some lines didn't go up, some went up a little bit more, but we're trying to get a really good idea of, we're trying to budget correctly, and so we have the exact right, or as close as possible to the right allocations for each of the lines. And those are the numbers, or the increases that make up that 2.375 increase. Now, as I said before, the $36 million that last year that it cost to run the district, 36 million, and that, when I say last year, I mean the year that we're in right now, so I shouldn't say that. The 36 million that we are paying this year to run this district, not all of that has come from Wareham. We have been able to use monies that we receive from federal and state government to lower that number. So if you look on the left side of this table, this is FY24. So you can see the $36,965,000 in the top of the second column. We received we used $450,000 from a 240 grant. We used $1 million in circuit breaker. We used $58,000 in school nutrition. We used Title I money. Last year we included it right in the budget rather than reducing it off at the end of the budget. But either way, it works the same way. That was in the budget, and that helped lower that number. And we received pre-K revolving. That's money that some of the peer students, PEER, peer students, pay a tuition, and it goes into a revolving account. We can use that to lower the budget number. We also received what was called an IVAQ grant. That was mostly for HVAC improvements. We used $86,310 to lower this budget. And this is the big one. The ESSER 3, $1.86 million last year we had, and we were able to lower that 36 million. So you can see in red there, we have $3.4 million that we had last year to offset the budget. And so what we asked last year from the town of Wareham was $33,510,000 to cover the rest of the budget. Now, going to the right side of the this table, you can see our the $39,341,000 for the FY25 budget. We're getting 240 grant money again, 515,000 we can use. We're using again $1 million of circuit breaker. School nutrition, 80,000 this year. Title I, rather than putting it in the budget, we pulled it out and just are using it as an offset. Pre-K revolving, 99,000. And then you can see we did get 2 additional grants, SOA for 125,000 and a tag salaries grant for 50,000. But the problem is that's $175,000, where last year those 2 in the blue was almost $2 million in offsets. So you can see the offsets for FY25 are $2.3 million or $1 million less than last year, and that significantly impacts on the impact of this budget or the increase of this budget. So after the offsets, $33 million for FY24 and $36 million for FY25. And you can see here, $36,950,000 for the FY25, $33,510,000 for FY24, and that's a $3.4 million increase, or 10.26%. Now, I want to point this out. This is level service. This is just for what we have currently in place. It's not adding anything. And it's a 10.26% increase. I also put an asterisk, and on the bottom there you can see bargaining units A, B, and D will be negotiating new CBAs. There is no COLA in this for those. So whatever COLA is decided on or negotiated will be factored into this budget. This is just another way of looking at how we came to that 3.4 million. Salaries and expenses increases was that $2.375 million increase. And then the revenue decrease from FY24 to FY25 of $1,064,000. And that means we're short $3.4 million for the FY25 budget. We have a number of slides here that break this budget down, and using a pie chart, it's a good way to look at it in a more clear way to understand where the money is going in our budget. So I'm going to ask our Director of Finance, Kristen Flynn, to take you through these slides.
Good evening, everyone. Again, as Dr. DeAndrea said, these next few slides are just going to show visually how our budget is made up. So sometimes it helps to see. In this case, this slide right here, it's showing us that of the school department's budget, a very large portion is salaries. We provide a service to the students of Wareham, and so 77.4% of our budget goes for our salaries of all of our staff members, and roughly 22.6% goes to our expenditures. So you can really see, the difference there. And that is pretty standard across school districts. You see, in the high 70s, low 80s for salaries, and the balance for the expenditures. So the next slide here breaks our budget out by function. When we report our expenditures and our revenues to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, we're required to report them based on these categories. So this is how it's broken down. You can see that the largest portion, of course, is instruction. So that 67% of our budget goes toward those functions that are considered instruction by the Department of Ed. The next highest is pupil services, and in pupil services, that's where our transportation is, so that's the largest part of it. Also, health services is under pupil services, so nursing, athletics, and other student activities, so that would be field trips and field trip transportation, things like that. That's the next highest portion. Then the third highest is maintenance and utilities. So that's what it costs all of our salaries and our expenditures to maintain our buildings and our fields and grounds. And also the big part of that as well is our utilities, our electricity and gas. The fourth is tuition, our out-of-district tuition, and that one tuition that we do have to Bristol County Agricultural. So that is also a larger portion of our budget. And then finally, we have administration. Again, that's mainly the school committee budget. It's a very small portion, superintendent's business office, and technology, district-wide technology. So you have those portions, and then some other small portions there with benefits and fixed charges. That's our insurance, some small part of insurance that we have, and that rounds it out for how our budget is broken down by function. So the next slide is the same thing, except we took the salaries, the salary portion of the budget, and said, how do those break down? Again, not surprisingly, the largest part of our salary budget is instruction. So that's our teachers, our paras, and any other substitutes, any instructional support salaries. The next largest is pupil services, so that would be the salaries of our bus drivers, and also in our athletic department, and any coaches, advisors for any of the after-school programs. That's all sitting in that part of the budget. The next highest, again, is maintenance and utilities. So you would see, our custodians, our school custodians, our facilities employees, and our fields and grounds employees. And then finally, administration. And there's a small portion, you might say, why is there anything in benefits and fixed charges? And that is some post-retirement or post any if we owe any vacation or sick time to employees when they leave, that would go in there. The Department of Ed classifies that under that, and also the school crossing guard. And again, these are how the Department of Ed says this is where you charge those expenses to. So similarly, take that same slide and divide our expenditures by function, and you can see the largest part is tuition, is our out-of-district tuition. And again, those are the tuitions for students to attend collaborative or private school placements. They can be very costly. They range quite considerably from roughly high 30s to over $200,000 per student. So you can see there's a wide range. We have 3 students that have tuitions over $200,000, several between $100,000 and $200,000, and a few in the high 90s, and then the rest are between roughly $40,000 to $90,000. So you can see that that adds up rather quickly. And those rates, again, are set by the state and by the collaborative. So those are expenses that are outside of our control. The next highest would be, we have maintenance and utilities. Again, most of those expenditures are to our heat and lights and other utilities to run the buildings, and any supplies, custodial supplies, any maintenance supplies. So those are those expenses there. Also, next, pupil services, athletics, student activities, and transportation. So there you would see any of the, anything the athletics teams need, uniforms, any sports equipment, also any, the athletic trainer or any other transportation is in there. So the fuel for the buses, of course, and any parts for our buses. So that can be quite high as well. And also in there as well is the out-of-district transportation, which is our vendor transportation. So again, that's how we get our students to some of these out-of-district placements. They can be, as Dr. DeAndrea said, in Yarmouth. They can be, there's some as close as either Marion, Mattapoisett, Rochester, some programs there. We have some programs in Hingham. We have some programs that we transport students to in Rhode Island. So it varies greatly. Some of those vans can cost around $300,000 per student per day. $300 per student per day. We have a few that are costing upwards of $300 per student per day. So if you do the math quickly, some students' transportations are between $50,000 and $100,000 just to get the student to where they need to go every day. So that's also a big portion of our budget. The next part is instruction, and you might say, well, gee, in our other slides we talked about how instruction is what we do. It's the biggest portion of the budget. Here, it's more supplies, so it's more instructional supplies. So it would be, you know, your paper, your pens, your pencils, maybe some technology devices. So it's not as, it's the opposite of what you would see the salaries. And we also have administration for supplies and expenses, and then benefits and fixed charges. So the important thing about this slide, I think, is it really shows that the little discretionary, I'll say discretionary funds that we do have. The expense side of our budget is just under $9 million, but roughly 41% of it is tuition. That's out of our control. 1% is benefits. That's also out of our control. Maintenance and utilities is 21% of the expense side of the budget. So that's out of our control. So we have very little real discretionary funds that over the years have gotten even more limited, because that's, you know, generally when you're making cuts, those are the, you know, the easiest cut to make sometimes without making a large impact. So that's really, I think, the important part of this slide, that it shows how little discretionary funds that we do have. So I think that rounds out our charts, and I'll turn it over to Dr. DeAndrea.
Okay, so this is some kind of final thoughts. A level service budget would be $36,950,000, or a total of $3.4 million, increase 10.26%. That's level service. Since I started back in September of 2022, we have reduced 12 positions. I should say that by the end of December, by the end of this month, we will have reduced 12 positions. And I feel that we're in a good spot right now. We have the staff we need to provide our students with the education they need. And it's unfortunate that we're looking at a 10.26%. And I recognize that's a huge number that the town, I know, looks at and says that that's too much. So what would be reasonable? What can I, as the superintendent of schools, say, hey, this is what we can do? I can try to get to 6.73%, and I put that up there. That for us would be a $1.84 million cut. That is about 20 positions. And that will be very impactful on the schools. I am hopeful. The governor last year came through with a significant increase in Chapter 70. I don't know. I hear all kinds of things coming out at the state level about finances, and it doesn't make me terribly optimistic, but she knows the situation school districts are in. We're not the only school district in this boat. And so I'm hopeful that she comes through with Chapter 70 that can help us with this, because this is a pickle that we're in, and making these cuts will be significantly impactful on our students. And with that said, we're happy to answer questions.
Blast out first.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions, and for what it's worth, I was able to come to the workshop, which I found very helpful. A lot of good detail there. I guess the first thing that catches my attention here is that you said that you're factoring in 5% for inflation, but that's not really where the predictions are for 2024. They're actually somewhat less than that. So I just wanted to point that out. I think we might be talking about less than 3%.
That would be great. I mean, that 5%, if we were to take that out, I think it's $75,000. So.
Well, then what is the inflation factor applied to?
So we applied it to an assortment of different lines where we felt that it would be impactful. Supply lines, things like that, were very small in number anyway. And then we also not just blanketed across, but we looked at the history of the line. And actually, if the line had been going down, we factored that in and maybe didn't increase it or actually reduced it.
What about utilities? What do you factor in?
Utilities, we did 5%. We did a little bit more for Wareham Elementary based on the last year.
So you also said you're not showing any salary increases in the sort of proposed number, I'll say. But there are upcoming obvious salary increases because of the negotiations. So you're
Right.
just not factoring that in at all right now.
That is not in this budget, that's correct.
Right.
That
So-
would be, that's kind of whatever is settled on with those bargaining units will have to be factored into this. Will impact this, yes.
So basically, where we are right now is we don't know what state aid's going to be. We don't know what salaries are going to be. It really is a very challenging position to be in for all of us.
Absolutely.
Those are my
Oh, I'm
questions.
sorry. We'll go Jeff first, and then,
I just wanted to say, if you're talking CPI, you're right. It could very well be 3%. The problem with CPI, as citizens know very well, is literally the way they do it is they send people out to go, see what prices are for a variety of things. It can be exceedingly inaccurate, number one. Number two, food and energy is, depending on which measurement of CPI you're using, is sometimes excluded. And in fact, the Fed likes to exclude it because it's so volatile. But when you're talking about a school district, it's not the same as going out to a grocery store or going out to a department store at all. So things that shouldn't rise more than 3% do for a variety of reasons. So I understand your point, and I wish it was simple as saying, cut that 5 to 3, but it just isn't that simple.
I'd like to expand on that just a little bit as, the person who looked a lot at these lines. So absolutely, the big ticket items that we see, the tuitions, those rose by 4.69% because that's what the state said. So it would not be a good idea for us to go any lower than that because we would already be putting ourselves in a bad spot. And that's a major part of our budget. Utilities as well. So in some cases, in some buildings, the utilities, it was budgeted pretty right-sized for that building. So you might not see. So originally, if we applied 5% across the board, taking a look at the history, that got backed off, but then that got absorbed into a higher increase at the elementary school, for example. So, and each line item was looked at. So like Dr. DeAndrea said, where we saw that the history of expenditures, say in some of the line items, were right at the budgeted amount for FY24 and looking at what we spent, year to date. And again, we're making these budgets in September for almost a whole year later. So a lot can and does change. So we're making our best guess based on our history. So, so we're looking at that. So some of those expenditures were not increased 5%. Some of them, for example, when the principals come and the other department heads come with their budgets, they're the ones that are living the reality of those budgets every day, especially for supplies. So they're seeing increases in the prices of classroom supplies, of perhaps paper goods for custodial supplies. So any of that. So when they look at their budgets, they'll say, I need to increase this because I already don't have enough in my FY24 budget to make the cover. So we're seeing increases in our supplies based on where we're able to get our supplies from. So sometimes we try to get the lowest price, but sometimes that's not always, available to us. So those are some of the things. So it wasn't an across-the-board 5% increase, but in our larger expenditure items, yes, it was. And that was based on either what we've been told it's going to be from the state or what we've experienced. So I hope that gives a little bit of a more clear answer.
Good, my mic's on this time. So I have just 3 questions. You might not be able to answer the first one for me right away. Do you guys know how many students there are per grade in the high school? Meaning from 8th grade, each grade, how many there are? That'd be awesome, thank you. While she's working on that, forgive my ignorance on this, but what kind, if I'm allowed to ask it, what kind of school, you said there was tuitions for some schools that were up to 200,000. Are those special needs schools or, okay,
Yes, all of those are, with the exception of the tuition to the Bristol County Agricultural School, they're all out-of-district special education. And some of those ones could be a residential placement.
okay. Last one is, you said at one point here that some of the kids are crossing into Bridgewater, like Bridgewater State College there. Do we pay for their tuition fees for that, or is that they pay for?
We don't pay,
They pay it? Okay. Yeah. Okay. I love that, by the way. Yeah, I don't mean I love them paying, I'm just saying I think that's cool. I wish I was that smart.
Dr. Swan?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll have to get back to you. I have it broken out by how many kids who are in inclusion and sub-separate and those numbers and then the total number. But I can get you the exact numbers and I'll get them to you.
That'd be awesome, thank you.
No problem.
April?
so I do have those numbers.
Oh, you do?
Oh, you do, good.
So 8th grade is 108, I'm sorry, try that again. 8th grade is 166, 9th grade is 124, 10th grade is 120, 11th grade 78, 12th grade 91, and we have 13th grade, which is 12. Those are kids that stay with us till 22.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
April?
I don't necessarily have a question, because obviously I've been in on this, but more of just some points that I want to make when people are thinking about why we put together the numbers that we put together. from what I see at the tables, there are 4 of us. I mean, my son graduated this year, but there are 3 others that have kids that are currently enrolled in our schools. I don't know, you have one as well? I don't know you that well, so, okay, so there's 5 of us that have recent students in our district, right? And we know the impact and the involvement of having after-school activities, of having athletics, of having extracurricular or competitive electives with other schools, and having honors classes, and having special ed classes, and some of the specialists, and some who require a one-to-one para, and some who don't. We, at the MASC conference that we were just at, when I talk about the programs that we have going on in Wareham, there are districts across the state and towns that have 3 times the funding available to them that don't offer what we offer our students. And the fact that our reputation doesn't accurately represent what our teachers do, what our students do, and what our schools have to offer, it kills me every day, which is why I ran to be on the school committee in the first place. My son is a freshman in college right now. He just graduated from Wareham, and they went straight into apartment living. There's no dorm. They're dorms, but they're apartment dorms. So no meal plan, no anything. He had to do financial literacy in order to graduate from Wareham High School. He's better equipped to handle his money and his finances than half the kids in his freshman class. He did culinary for 2 years as an elective. He's the only one of his roommates that can cook in a full kitchen and help his roommates out because of the stuff that he learned at Wareham. We have such a diverse culture, from the lowest economic standing to the highest, depending on the time of the year. We have a diverse ethnic population in this town. So he's equipped to deal with people and situations at an equal level because it's what he's used to. And I think we need to show that we are invested in our kids because, in 5-10 years, some of us won't be here, but our kids will. And when we're invested, we don't lose those kids to, not the special ed district tuitions, because that's something like they said, we can't control that. There are kids that have needs that we just can't fulfill. If a student needs to go to a residential program because of their need, that's something that we should be able to offer to them as our district, and that's out of our control. But the students that we're losing by reputation to schools that mirror us, losing kids to Carver, to Bourne, to some of the charter schools, when we have more to offer. Sturgis is an IB school, so are we. And people are going there because they're thinking that that's competitive. So if we're showing that we're invested in our town and in our kids, and we're not willing to fund that, the schools are what bring people and businesses to a town. The better reputation our schools have, the more people are going to want to live here. The more people are going to want to school choice their kids in and have their districts pay us the tuition. They're not going to be, competing with regional, local towns that don't offer what we offer. And I think it would be a huge disservice to not support this. And the cost of everything has gone up post-COVID. Everyone sees that at the grocery store. And my job is extremely slow right now, which never happens before the holidays. It's just what happens. You need to pick and choose what's important, and this is important. So that's all I wanted to say.
Brennan?
If I could echo along with that, I was looking at, the percentage of graduates that we have. If we're not going to invest in our schools, this number of people going to 4-year colleges and private universities, public universities, 2-year, it's at about 70% right now, 72 or so. It's going to go down. And what's that going to do for our town when only 40, 50% of our graduates are going on to higher education, to higher training to get better jobs? What's that going to bring economically to our area if, high school education is the top that we provide for our children? I mean, they're not going to be able to go for the better jobs and then bring that money back into town. And I mean, I know we can all say, look, just give us more money. It's that easy. I know it's not that easy. Everyone here knows it's not that easy. But like she said, and like we're all kind of thinking, you have to, when we're making our budgets at home, you prioritize. What could be a bigger priority than our kids?
Yes, please.
So just a couple of questions. I don't know that it's so much about not having a willingness to want to invest in our kids, it's the ability. With everything going up, the cost of living, the cost of everything, it's more about ability, not really willingness. I have children that are part of this school district. I get what the school district's trying to do, but some of the things that I have some questions about, and maybe there's easy answers, but I don't know because I'm not behind the financial inner workings of how you make your budget. But if I look at surrounding districts that are somewhat similar to us in student population, I look at Bourne. Bourne has about 1,600 students in their last budget that came out. Their total budget for the district was 26 million, and 16 million of that went to salaries. Now I look at Wareham, we're a little over 2,000, 2,100. Our budget that we're looking at for last year was 36 million, with roughly about $29, $30 million going to salaries. Why is there such a huge discrepancy when the student ratio is the same? It's about 12.1, 12.2. What would cause our district to be so much higher in salaries than a district that has roughly the same amount of students to teachers?
I'd have to look at Bourne's budget and their whole situation before I could answer that. I mean, we could guess, but to give you a good answer, I would really need to understand Bourne's budget situation and their schools and their demographics. And I mean, I know their demographics somewhat, but for me, I would just be guessing.
And then if I look at just overall percentages of increases that have been proposed in their towns, Bourne was at 3.53%, Fairhaven was at 4.29%, and this year we're looking at 10.29. So, I mean, there's just huge discrepancies in the amount that they're looking for and the amount that we're looking for. And I'm not saying that the number isn't warranted. But if I'm just looking at it if I'm an average citizen just looking quickly at the numbers, our number is substantially higher. And not that I'm not willing to invest in children and our kids, but just looking at those numbers, it's a scary number. We're triple of one district, more than double in another. So, are there things that can be looked at? I mean, I know that you talked about, making some, potentially making some cuts, and those cuts could potentially be in the vicinity of 20-ish, positions. They're probably important positions. I mean, I don't think that there's no important position in the school. I don't care if you're, a top flight teacher or you're the janitor. It doesn't matter. All the positions matter. So I get concerned when we have to talk about cutting positions because it's taking away from the ability to function properly. But I just look at the number and, quickly just jump and say, oh my goodness, why are we so much different? And I know it's a tough question to answer because you don't have the inner workings of each budget, and neither do I. I'm just looking at the outside perspective of it, is why is the number so different? And maybe that's something that can be looked at to say, well, what are they doing that we're not, or what are we doing that they're not? But those are just some of the concerns that I see just from an outside perspective without really digging deep.
I mean, one thing is obviously a large impact on our budget was the ESSER 3 money that we used to really maintain the services that we had for our students that we're losing. I don't know how the other districts, I know some districts did the same. Some of my colleagues I have spoken to where they are confronted with similar increases that we have. So I think that could be one of the reasons for the discrepancy between some districts. But again, I mean, and if you really want me to dive into that, I can. I know the Bourne superintendent very well, and I can call her and get that information.
I mean, maybe it might be helpful. I'm not saying that it's going to give you all the answers, because there's really no magical answer. You know, you can't just make money happen, and I get that. But just out of curiosity, the differences just made me kind of, you know, jump.
No, it's a good question. It's a good question.
Mr. Sweat?
So, just in response, because frankly, I looked at that kind of stuff myself. As I think someone said, it's demographics, but let me be more specific. About 3/4 of our kids are classified as high needs. Now, that's a combination of things that gets you into a high needs bucket. We're Bourne is slightly less than 50, so a big number. SPED, special education, we're also 50% higher there. The cost of SPED, as was very well documented in the presentation, can be extraordinary. When I looked at this presentation many days ago, the first thing I did was take those anyway, I took all the students that were in the private and the collaborative and divided it into the total cost. And my reaction was, wow, that's over $90,000 on average per student. You can get room, board, and tuition at one of the most expensive universities in the country for less than that, and that's what we're spending. And on top of that, we're spending to transport them, which, as our Director of Finance said, can cost an enormous amount on top of those tuitions. So the demographics, which was so clearly said, makes a huge difference. And the biggest problem with that is we are seeing that rise. Now, if there's a small bit of optimism associated with it, our elementary school seems to be slightly declining over the last few years in terms of the percentage. I think our principal would agree with that. And that I actually attribute that to the fact that the kids are becoming more successful. One of my biggest concerns about the cuts, and the elephant in the room, of course, as everybody knows, is we can't afford it, as you said in your opening remark. But I think we turned the corner academically in the last year, and to remove 20 positions at the time that we seem to be turning the corner academically could be disastrous academically. And it also, I think, and here I may be getting out of my depth as a non-educator, but the success at the elementary school, which is reducing the number of special education children who have to have those individual education plans, we might literally be cutting off our nose to spite our face by almost increasing the number of kids who suddenly are classified as special needs, when if they got a little bit more attention, which gets to the point where 3/4 high needs, and that has all sorts of repercussions, not just the teacher, but also the psychologists, the social workers, the behavior analysis analysts, et cetera, et cetera. So the impact of the demographic difference between, say, a Bourne and a Wareham is huge. But the last thing I want to say is I don't want anybody, especially parents who may be watching, okay, anybody to think that just because we have 3/4 high needs and 50% more special education students, that you can't get a fabulous education in our schools. I am blessed by the fact that I've been coaching for the last 20 years. And these, I always ask our graduates, especially in their first year or two of college, how you doing? Were you well prepared? And I have not had one graduate come back to me and say, I'm struggling. They all come back to me, and in some cases, they say, in the case of BSU, they say, our high school courses are more difficult than Bridgewater State. So the ability to get a great education in this school district is absolutely here, and of course those universities. But it's not just getting admitted, it's how are you doing when you get in there that to me is far more important. So despite all the struggles, despite all the high needs, despite all the special education students, our kids are getting really well prepared for the next stage of their life.
Thank you. I'd just like to add that I know we're all fighting for pieces of the pie, or advocating for pieces of the pie in the town. And there's still a lot of unknowns. We're early in this process, really, because of Chapter 70 and so many unknowns. So we realize that. I would say I went to the Mass Department of Revenue website to look at the percentages that towns pay in their budget towards the school budget, and Wareham's was nearly 49%. I did 12 area communities, surrounding communities, the average was 50%. So we're in the ballpark with what all towns do in their budgets. And I know schools are a big portion of town budgets, but we're not out of the realm. In fact, we're under the average slightly by all our area schools. Mr. Slavin.
I'm going to make a few comments. I don't expect to have a response at this time, but your comment about 49%, we keep forgetting that the town pays a whole bunch of money in for school expenses that doesn't show there. I know our budget for the school, for monies that actually go for the school, is well over 60%. Now, as everybody knows, I'm not running again, so I can say what I want today. Basically, I've been at this for 12 years. It's very discouraging for the town to have to be an adversarial roles department versus school. The school is a department of the town. It is not something that's separate. It's all part of the whole piece of the puzzle. And we do this every year. We go and we cut the budgets, we do this, we do that. Mr. Sweat, I think it was a year ago, made a comment to the school committee meeting, which I kind of smiled because I knew what was going to happen overall. And he chastised the school and the school committee for spending money and doing things, knowing the funds were not going to be there a year later. You made the statement, we're going to have some major cuts or something because we spent a couple $1 million more than we were going to have. You can't spend money unless it's a long-term fund source. You had your extra money, you knew what was going to happen, and now you're reaping the benefits of it, which is not a benefit. You have COVID monies that were given out to make life easier. You had ERA money that was made easier. Those things all disappear. Everybody in the town especially knew that coming into the fiscal year 25-26 budget, we're going to have to tighten up everything. How many people out of the 12 positions are retirees that you're calling retired? How many people have you added into the system since 2019? These are all things that you have to look at. We're running a business at the end of the day. Yes, education's part of it. Education is critical. I came from the town of Brookline. I never had any issue in Brookline with anything I wanted. If I wanted to play a trombone or play drums, they'd give it to me. If I wanted to do arts and stuff, available to me. Sports, no matter what it was. I come from a different era. My background doesn't fit anything that happens today. You have classrooms where you have a teacher and you have a second teacher. The second teacher is there to discipline the kids that don't want to cooperate. Why do you think that we have such a flux out between the middle school and the high school? You only have, because the high schools are 9th to 12th grades. They add 8th because you have so much room in the high school. You have 413 students in the high school. That's a crime, basically, in the town of Wareham. That means there's a huge amount of people that are left. How many kids do we have in Upper Cape which provide a service that we should have never given up in the first place? We have a population base that the tech schools are ideal for them. You get 320, 340 kids this year. We've just lost control of what's going on. My comment is, I have people I know in Dennis and Yarmouth, very similar problems. What do? They merged a whole bunch of the schools to save costs, et cetera. They regionalize things. You have to stop doing what we do every year and make some of these changes that have to be done. The town doesn't have enough money coming in. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of kids in the system where they're here, they're difficult to educate. The sped is sped. The state is giving you more money this year. Again, they've already committed to it. McKinney-Vento money, they're fully funding. The charter school stuff, you're getting increases. The Chapter 70 monies are increasing. The state's committed to a multi-billion-dollar program over 5 years. I believe Wareham probably qualifies for the double of the amount of money coming in per student at $60 or whatever, because we have so much special need. We probably have most of the kids on some kind of food program here. I don't think kids pay for anything for lunch anymore.
That's statewide.
All I'm trying to get at is that we have a system here that hasn't worked for a long time, and we keep letting it go the same way. It's time to say, hey, how do we move forward? Because we can't afford to do things the way it is. We can't run it the way it is. It's time to say enough is enough. What do we need to do to make this thing work? Because we all have a moral responsibility to provide the best education possible for the children. You know, that's how we gotta, none of us here did our parents pay for our education. Anyone thinks that happened, it's no way. Payroll, you know, property taxes, et cetera, don't even come close. Wareham, I think, has been $2,000 over the DESI base for the last few years. Some years back, we may be under, but we're over. So we're not underfunding it per student. We're just not using the monies we have efficiently and properly. And that's my comment. I'm basically throwing out a challenge to all of you, because I won't be here for it, but it's time to say no more, how do we fix this? Instead of fighting about dollars here and dollars there. It's not gonna work. We'll be back here a year later with the same thing. You're gonna have to cut, you know, your expenses for the coming year because you didn't take into effect what was gonna happen with all that money that's gonna disappear. The state may come back and give you some of it, but you're probably gonna have to cut $2 million out of your budget more than what you think you do. I don't see the town administrator, I don't see the side from the selectmen's side saying this is all fine and dandy anymore. Thank you. I
Dr.
don't
DeAndrea?
expect any response.
All right, you said a lot there, Alan.
I definitely did.
First of all, using the ESSER money, I wasn't here, but using the ESSER money
Just so you know, I'm not,
may I speak?
let me just finish. Make it clear, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying that we knew when they went and spent that money and everything else, it was in the budget. School committee member said you're gonna have a problem a year later. Now you have a problem.
Right, so it was either have the problem then or have the problem now. So the problem was gonna be there, and what they did is they kept the district afloat, what they did. That's what you have to do. Money comes along, you gotta keep it afloat. And yes, it happened now, or you could have done it back then, but it had to happen. As far as regionalization, I've worked in 2 regional districts. They have higher pupil cost than any of the districts that are not regionalized. It is a mistake to regionalize. That would be something that will create more costs for this district. Why is our high school numbers decreasing? Yeah, we have kids they go to Upper Cape, they go to other districts for lots of different reasons. Parents make decisions about their kids. We're not the only ones that do that. Bourne's having the exact same problem. They have decreasing numbers at their high school. And all across the Cape is a decreasing in enrollment. So that's not unique to Wareham.
Didn't say that. I'm just saying that the system, whether it's here, whether it's in Bourne or any other town, all the same. You can't keep running the system the same way you're running it. It's not going to work. It's time
Mr.
to
Chadwick, I
figure it
think,
out.
sorry, Mr.
Thank you.
Chadwick is next.
Just to verify 2 things here. One, I did talk to a selectman from Bourne today. Bourne is having the same issues as well. And I believe after talking to Mr. Forget about a month ago, we have about, I believe it's 276 or in that ballpark of high school students going to UCT. That's it.
Thank you.
April?
So I had more of just a response to Mr. Bessie when he was, you know, it's easy to try to compare to your regional district or your local towns when you want to compare where your district is. We're surrounded by Marion, Bourne, Rochester, you know, ORR, those kind of districts that aren't demographically similar to us. DESI actually has what they call DART data, where they actually take and compile a list of schools that are the most similar with enrollment, with special needs, with demographics, with financials, all that. And we're more aligned with Athol, Royalston, Gardner, Greenfield, North Adams, Southbridge, Ware, Webster, small rural towns with less of a budget that we are. That's where we fall when DESI looks at the data that you're trying to compare us to Bourne. We're not even close. So just so that you're aware, there is a calculation that they use to find what is the most similar districts to yours and where those numbers fall. And that's all accessible on the DESI website.
Thank you.
Again, I understand what you're saying, but the bottom line is it is similar. Population base in Wareham is a very mixed population. There's a lot of summer people that come here, they're here for a couple months and gone, et cetera. But the bottom line is, we have a system in which the kids leave because the parents don't want the kids in the system when they get to a certain point. And
There's
you need
also
to
a lot
change
of
that.
students that have been pulled in the last 3 years to be homeschooled as well, and that's no control of any district, and that's also being seen statewide.
Again,
And that's affecting budgets for a lot of districts as well.
if the system worked and the parents felt it was safe and whatever, you wouldn't have these issues.
Brennan?
Okay, well, to your point, one of the things that we focused on, one of his goals is to fix the public relations and that very problem, because one of the things I noticed is we talked about one of the biggest increases in money is how much we're spending to educate Wareham students elsewhere. What if that was reversed? And one of the things that we are working on, part of it, is to get people, instead of sending our kids away, not only retaining them here so we can educate them a lot cheaper, but try to get more people to send their kids to Wareham. Now, if we lost 20 teachers, how are we going to be able to do that? So, I mean, I understand what you're saying. There is only so much money to go around. And I do want to apologize earlier for implying that people aren't interested in funding the school. Of course they are, but the point that I think that we're all trying to make is that there are going to be tough choices. There are going to be tough cuts. And yes, we are going to have to think a little bit differently about how some of this money is spent. But we can only afford to lose so much. We can only afford to cut so much before we're actually making the problem twice as worse for ourselves, because more kids will go away, more parents will pull their students, and we will find a bigger increase next time. You know, you said, I'm new to the board, I was barely here last year, I had just gotten elected during last year's thing. And he said, we're kicking the can down the road, basically. Well, we're going to have a bigger problem next year if we don't do something to improve our reputation and to do something with what we have now. I mean, having to do the best we can with what we've got. If we don't do that, the problem of more students leaving is going to be a bigger problem that we face next year. And we're going to have, if we go through with this, less money, less teachers, and less ability to do anything about it.
Mr. Sweat was next, then I'll go Norma.
You basically made my point. You kicked the can down the road, and now you're paying for it.
Mr. Sweat has the floor.
Constantly happen.
Mr. Sweat,
Sorry,
turn.
sorry.
Actually, I'll defer to Norma.
That's a first. So I'm going to use the dreaded O word, and that's override.
Yeah.
And looking at this from, I don't like to think of this as the town versus the schools, because you are us, and the kids are our kids. And you're right, education is incredibly important. And you're right, we need to make it a place that people want to be. But most of all, we need to do right by the kids. But we have this constant issue in the town of being understaffed, of having to reduce our hours, reduce our services. We have a bunch of positions that aren't even filled. And I don't know how we address that and this kind of an increase in the school budget if we're topped out at 2.5%. We have to be thinking about override if you're serious about getting this kind of a budget passed. I'd like to know how you think that could happen. What would you be able to do to make that happen?
I stand by what I said a year ago.
I know.
I used to run a business that was more than 50 times bigger than this, and it was for profit, so I cared deeply about efficiency, right? And mine was a healthcare business. So most people would say that's an essential service, just like education. We shouldn't have any illusions about what efficiency means when we say it, and I've said it. And in private, I've said a lot of things to our superintendent and our finance director. The problem is, it really comes down to you're asking the people who do the work, because that's 75% of the cost, to be more productive. That's literally what you're saying, de facto.
Yep.
And just as it was impossible for me to say to a nurse, be more productive, because that nurse's response is, you're asking me to give inferior care to what the patient needs, because if you increase my patient load by X%, then every patient gets a little less of me. It's not dissimilar to our population and saying to a teacher, be more efficient, be more productive. Especially, and this is really the reason that those cuts didn't occur a year ago, because we have 3/4 of our kids who are high needs. So when you ask a teacher to be more productive with a high needs kid, it's really fundamentally at odds with why they got into education. That's one side of the picture. The other side of the picture is, you're 100% right, we can't afford it. So that gets to Norma's point. But the voters can't afford higher taxes, right? So we are literally between the proverbial rock and a hard place. And I am very sympathetic to those voters who say, I care about kids, but I need to keep a roof over my head and food on the table. So the solution for this, I don't know the solution, but I can guarantee you that we have an essential business that is highly regulated by the state, especially those 30% or so of kids who have special needs. So we can't suddenly say to a special needs teacher, be more productive, because that probably means that child is not going to get what the law defines as the best possible education for that child. So I know I've done nothing but define the problem, and I haven't solved it. I will tell you that my friend Joyce and I have met with our, what feels like friends, because we see them all the time, constantly to talk about this very problem. In a sense, it's insoluble, it's intractable, whatever adjective you want to use. But it's very real, and it has nothing to do whether we made the cuts a year ago or we make the cuts now. Our only hope is that Maura Healey understands this fiscal cliff, which is what this 1.8 million represents to this district and many other districts across Massachusetts, understands that this fiscal cliff needs to be dealt with prudently, as thoughtfully and as gradually as possible. And just as she gave us a tremendous amount, and that created a higher base for Chapter 70. So I know the prudent town administrator has probably assumed only a relatively modest percentage increase for Chapter 70. And by the way, just so everybody understands, you have to spend almost $50,000 on a special education student before any reimbursement kicks in. So it may sound like something like $1 million from circuit breaker is a good thing. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's called better than not. But you have to spend the first $50,000 out of your LEA before you even get access to any of the circuit breaker. Bottom line is, the taxpayers of Massachusetts are going to have to help cities and towns like Wareham, or else we will literally have an intractable problem. And I think, as Brennan was alluding to, since we are required by law, and I don't believe regionalization is the answer, as our superintendent has already indicated, since we are required by law to do this, if we start to make our product inferior, we will only exacerbate the problem. So it is not a solution to simply say, become more efficient, you only get X, no matter what it costs to the product you're delivering to our children. That is not also a solution. That's just exacerbating the very problem that we have.
Productivity is not cutting back on the quality of what you do.
Not necessarily.
No, that's what productivity is supposed to do.
You're right. Efficiency is the better word. You use the word efficiency. But you're still, unless you give them a tool to make them more productive, okay, then it's just efficiency.
That's the job of the superintendent, et cetera.
Yeah, but I can guarantee you that Dr. Schwam and Dr. DeAndrea are not average educators. And they have thought deeply about how they can be more productive by giving their teachers better professional development, better tools, et cetera. If they existed for the 3/4 of the kids who have special needs or high needs, we would be doing it and we'd be advocating for it.
Putting out there what the problem is today.
I acknowledge your problem is accurate.
What my concern is, which Norma brought out, is the 2.5 override. If you remember back in 2015.
I do.
Well, I do probably more than most of you. We sat down, myself, Frank Heath, Larry McDonald, et cetera, and we sat down, we went through every part of the town's budget, everywhere. We told people exactly where the money would go. We put it on paper. We promised it would be done. What happened? 30% voted yes, 70% voted no. I sat in front of the school over in Minot there with a sign supporting it. I don't know how many times I got the middle finger as people drove by me. I saw people come out to vote in their pajamas, and I'm not exaggerating. I've never seen in my whole life in the town. They just came out from everywhere because we were going to make them pay more money. And the bottom line is, people, they don't trust us. That's the simple answer to all of it. I asked later on, we don't trust you to do what you said you're going to do. Because there's only 1 year in an override that you have to spend it as you stated. After that, you can do whatever you want with it. It's like, where you have DESI, you have your budget. On the town side, which I hate to say, we're allowed to move 5% of our money in our budgets, and that's it. On your side, on the school side, you can move money wherever you want once the budget's done. You're not restricted the same way. So there's a difference there. That's part of the problem of trust. But at the end of the day, they do not trust us to whatever we say. I'm an elected official, so therefore I'm a politician as far as they're concerned. They don't trust me at the end of the day. After 12 years, I have some people do, a lot of them don't. And it's the same thing all the way through the whole system here. Therefore, part of our problem is how do we build trust? Because that's part of the major issue of all this. If people trusted you, if people would understand that you need to pay for your education for your kids coming before you. If you don't, what are you going to have for a civilization going forward? Right now, I'm glad I have no kids, honestly. I am really glad because I don't have any grandkids, because their life coming in the next 20 to 25 years is a terrible future in my outlook. And I'm very pragmatic about things. But our world's changed drastically, and it keeps getting worse and worse. And we're just, unfortunately, we're just not sitting there saying, what do we put our money into, where do we invest? If you don't invest in your kids for the future, there is no future. At least not in the world anybody wants to live in that I know of. So all I'm doing is I'm saying it's time we stop. How do we make this work better? My productivity, efficiency, whichever way you want to put it is, how do we get, it's not so much do we put more numbers through, it's how do we make it better all the way through? And how do we find ways to fund this properly? And right now, today, if you ask someone about, Wareham, you go into the real estate things, Wareham's listing for education, for people coming in, it's a low rate, unfortunately. It doesn't matter how many wonderful programs we have, it's what the actual population thinks is going on. And I'm not picking on the student, the superintendent, I'm not picking on him. I'm just saying this is the situation we basically have today. How do you fix it? You can't keep going the way you're going because you won't fix it. So
April?
it's like taking money and, you might as well put it in the toilet and flush it. Because, you get all the money you want. If you don't do it the right way, it doesn't work. That's all I have to say.
April?
So you made a mention about, how do you get the public doesn't trust, right, elected officials? And that's not a problem that's just simply affecting Wareham. But I think the biggest thing is it's transparency. It is doing what you say when you say you're going to do it and proving it, because trust is earned. And yes, people are going to be leery because they felt that they weren't getting the whole truth in possibly prior administrations, possibly prior elected officials, and that carries over, unfortunately, because negativity is a far more impactful snowball when it's rolling down a hill than positivity, right? So the only way to change it, is to be transparent, is to have accountability, is to be vocal and honest and upfront and say, yeah, we do have an issue, how are we gonna fix it? Acknowledge that there's a problem and that you're working towards it. I think what happened previously is a lot of departments, and I'm not saying it's one or the other, it's, it's a global issue, not global, but a national issue, but everything's fine, brush it under the rug, and only address a problem after the problem is escalated to the point of no return, instead of saying, hey, this looks like this could be an issue, we're gonna acknowledge it publicly and let you know we see it too, and that we're gonna work on it together. And that's the only way it's gonna happen. So having a joint meeting like this once a year for this one issue, maybe that's the start. Maybe there are other things where we all overlap in other avenues that build the trust with each other, because if it looks like at these meetings that we don't trust each other and we're fighting against each other for the piece of the pie, you're right. If it looks like we don't trust each other with what we're going to do with these budget requests, the public isn't going to want to trust us. We need to do more collaborative things with every committee in this town that wants to work together so that we are a united front and the town can trust us. Because if it looks like we don't trust each other and we're all fighting over this one crumb, then it's not going to put a good taste in the mouth of the people in the town who are going to try to get things to move forward for us, for any of our boards.
Don't disagree. I'm a selectman in the town of Wareham. But I knew when I became a selectman, I figured, well, I'm retired, let's do this and do this right. So I reached out and I became a director of the Mass Municipal Association. And I was on the board of directors for the Mass Selectmen Association. I'm also right now for the Plymouth County Advisory Board, the chairman. I just stepped down as the chairman for the Serpent Commission. I deal with a lot of communities. Every community, when I speak to, when I talk to selectmen, the one thing that comes out, which is part of the whole problem, is I hate the school department. I hate the school committee. They spend all this money, they never have enough, whatever it is, et cetera. It's there. It doesn't belong there. It's like, the school is the enemy of every town. There are a few towns, that have a lot of money. You go to things like Wellesley and some other places, and you look at how much money they have. There's a simple fact, I think it's Michael Goodman at the University of Mass here in Dartmouth. There's a bunch of papers on education and economy. The higher the level of education, that's basically, done by, the residents, is the higher level of the actual income level of the town and the services, school, et cetera. It's a proven fact. It's nothing we make up at all. It's just as the education level of your community increases, everything goes with it. Crime goes down, et cetera. It's just the way it is. And unfortunately for Wareham, we're sitting in a place where we're in a difficult position. That's why I'm saying it's time that we need to change it. And I'm really tired of having to say, the school committee this or the school department that. We're not helping, we're making it worse. And every community that I know of does the same thing right now. There's only a few of them. I'd say less than 10% of the 351 communities in Massachusetts are in a situation where they don't have this issue. That's not a very pleasing number to me to think about it. That means 35, 40 communities are happy and the rest of us are not. We have certain communities that can get an override whenever they want. Very small percentage. In the last 5 years, most overrides attempted have failed. So, whether we meet more or sit down and have some kind of subcommittee to figure out how we do it, but you need to change how we do this. This is nice, we do this once, we walk away and we go back just the way we were. We come back a year later, it's the same thing. I'm too old to fight this anymore.
Joyce?
I just want to say, I want to go back to something that Norma said, and I think Kristen said it too, is that we're talking about this budget now because we're all following a process that's been set out by the town charter, that this is the timing.
You can
But the
blame that on me.
timing isn't good, right? You're right, we haven't negotiated contracts, but this is it's early to be talking about this budget. And we don't know what Chapter 7, and we don't know what state aid. So I'm going to remain optimistic that in 6 weeks or 8 weeks, we're going to be having a different conversation. Maybe I'll have to eat those words, but I'm going to remain optimistic that will be the case.
I think former Governor Baker put things in place, and from what I can see at the state level, Maura Healey is basically gonna follow through, you know, things there. But it's still, you're not gonna have enough to what you need. So. and
Well, we
can't-
won't know until we know,
I know,
right?
but we can't, you really, if we have to depend on the state, you know, to provide us with the funding, if the federal government, you know, goes a little softer than what it is, then the money gets less to the state, comes less to us. You know, just the way it is. So the only way you fix things is you do it yourself. I hate to wait, there's no such thing as a white knight coming down the road to take care
Well,
of
that's not what I'm saying. I'm not
it. I know, but I'm just
unrealistic.
saying is it's
I'm just saying that every year at this time of year, we have this conversation, and then
the same.
things change, right? So,
I mean, I think the town is getting, in the projected Chapter 90 ARPA money, we're getting, I don't know, $400,000 more. That doesn't cover anything. You can't even, you can't even be level funded at that point.
Does anyone who hasn't spoken yet have any questions or comments? Or Mr. Sullivan, I don't know if you want to address the crowd at all, but I would open it up to anyone who has not spoken yet that would like a chance to speak.
I wouldn't mind, not necessarily, just giving some information. We have been doing the preliminary revenues versus the fixed costs. Excuse me, the fixed costs are the things such as, what we project with the Upper Cape Cod Tech increase. There are new students going in there, so we'll see a higher enrollment. We know that Plymouth County, the retirement is going to be a high assessment. We've already got that assessment. Health insurance probably projecting around 6%. So we went through some of these as an exercise. Those are all the things that come together and are what you'll call almost the uncontrollables. So when we did those and then projected with the revenues, and Mr. Sweat is correct, I'm on the state aid, especially for Chapter 70 and such, I did not pump in a lot of money into there because I don't know. And I also am really worried about the charter school and choice, because last year was the first time we saw flat, if you will, probably since about 2012. Because I remember at one point our state aid, our state assessments were $2,045,000 in total, and now we're at 6.1, with about 4.2 of it being charter school choice and charter school sending. So, long story short, bringing it back to the end, when we took what we look at for the new revenues and took the fixed cost expenses, and I think everybody's right. This is pure guesswork on the state aid and assessments until we hear around January 20th to 25th. Ironically, the budget's due the 25th, so how that works, I don't know, but we somehow do it every year. We have about 1.2 million left over. So that's for all the school increases and all the town increases. So that, when you look at it, let's say everything shook out how we said it, you're looking at substantially less than the 2.2 million. So even if we got an additional 1 million aid without the assessments, brought you up to the 2.2, you're not factoring in any, that would be no increases for any town departments, anything like that. So I would say, while we're hoping, I would be prepared to bring it in closer to, the 1 million mark for an increase and that's probably a little aggressive at this point because that's not factoring in anything for town departments. The one thing I think I was confused about, so I apologize if it's not an accurate question, but in the presentation there was about 1.57 million for contractual obligations. That doesn't include what you're bargaining now. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's 3 units that we are currently bargaining. It includes their steps and lanes, but does not include a COLA.
Okay. So, the one thing, and I don't know how it factored in because I did it as a quick and dirty, That's about a 6.04% increase before COLAs. So, and I'm assuming that probably means that you have people getting masters and getting degrees, which jumps them up gets them into a different lane, which is good, right? We want a better educated employee is better. But I mean, that's just something we need to think about as well, because I don't know if that's going to be, is that trending for the next 3 years or so? So we're looking at, 18% plus whatever the COLAs would be over the next 3 years. We know just on your budget, if it's starting off at 1.5, 1.6 million, we know that's not going to, even if we had the best state aid in the world, that's not going to be supportive. We can't do that. So that's just one of the things we need to keep in the back of our mind.
All right, well, I would like to thank everyone this evening for coming out, for offering their comments, insights. I know the process will continue, and I'm sure we will be having many more discussions between now and the town meeting. Right, so do we have any other school business? Seeing none, would the selectmen like to adjourn their portion of the meeting?
Yes, we have nothing else for our 48-hour business. God, no, I swear no is gonna kill me one of these days. Nothing else for our 48-hour business. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
And do we have a motion from the school
So
committee?
moved.
Do we have a second? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 500. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.